So today we're going to talk about comparing decimals and fractions that might be negative or might be positive. If you think about everything you know about negatives and positives and putting those numbers in order, and everything you know about comparing decimals and fractions and putting those in order, we're just going to combine the two skills. This is chapter 5, lesson 5, and I'm actually splitting that lesson into two parts. So this is part 1. Okay, so in general, I would encourage you to compare positive to negative first. You know that a negative number will always be less than a positive number. It doesn't matter how big or how small the digits are. It doesn't matter if it's fractions versus decimals versus whole numbers versus mixed numbers. If it's a negative, it will always be less than a positive. Now, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we have two negatives to compare. Sometimes we have two positives to compare. In that case, I would suggest a number line, either one that you actually draw out or one that you just kind of visualize in your head. And if you have fractions that you need to compare or put in order, you need to be sure that there are common denominators. So let's get into this. I have an example here. We have negative 1 2/10 and positive 8/10 that we're going to compare. Now, I drew my number line out because we're going to talk about that, but this is an easy one. I don't even care that this is a 1 and this is a 0.2. 1 is positive and 1 is negative. So that makes my answer super easy. The negative will always be less than the positive. Now, if you needed to do this on a number line, here you can see I've got 0, we've got the positives on the right and the negatives on the left. I see there are 5 lines here and we get to 1, positive 1. So that means that this would be 2/10, 4/10, 6/10, 8/10. That would be here. And on the other side, I'm going to go at least to 1. And the same, since this would be evenly spaced, we would have negative 1 and then negative 1 2/10. So if you're comparing them on the number line, the left is always less and the right is always more. Left, less, they both start with L's. That should help you remember it. So the one that's down here will always be less. Luckily, we can do that with the signs for this problem. Not always the case. Like example 2. Now, example 2, I did give with a vertical number line. Cover this up here. Just to give some practice with a vertical number line. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you, sometimes you'll be given a number without the same number of digits. Okay, so I could have been given here negative 1 4/10, and over here be given negative 1 25/100. Well, that can be difficult to compare because here there's only 1 digit in the decimal places. Here there are 2. So we can add zeros to the end. Now I've got 40 versus 25. I've got the same number of digits. Okay, they're both negative. So I am just going to have to compare. I'm going to put them on the number line. What I've shown here is the bottom part of the number line. 0 would be like up here somewhere. So we've got negative 1 2/10, negative 1 3/10, negative 1 4/10. This negative 1 4/10 or 40/100 is easy because it's one of the things on my number line. I kind of do it to the side just because I think it's easier to see. Sometimes when I go right on the line, it gets kind of muddled. Now, I don't see 1.25 on my list. I see 1.20 and I see 1.30. I do know that counting 25 is halfway in between. So I'm going to put that number right there, halfway in between. I'm going to teach you bad habits. All right. Now, if you think about 0 being way up here somewhere, if this were temperatures, which one was warmer? Which one was colder? Well, I know colder is more negative, so colder would be down here. Lower is less. Higher is, we'll say more. I'll stick with the same words. All right, so lower is less. This negative 1.4 is less. All right, let's go to a fraction example. We did say that we could compare with just the signs. Unfortunately, that's not going to help here because they're both negative. So negative 3/8, negative 5/16. If you remember, those negative signs could be in one of 3 places. With the numerator, it could be with the denominator, or it could be like this one and be right with the fraction bar. 3 equally correct ways to show a negative fraction. Now, I do remember from the top, I need some common denominators. So I'm thinking, let's see, 8, 16, 32. Let's go with 16. And then I don't have to change the one over here. All right. So 5/16 is going to stay the same. I will keep the negative sign with it. If you think this is going to get blended in with the fraction bar, you can always stick it to one of the numbers, jump it up top to the 5, or drop it down to the 16. No problems with that. All right, so let's see. 8 times 2 gave me the 16. So 3 times 2 is going to give me 6, and I'll keep the negative sign. Now, because they have the same denominators, I can actually just compare the numerators. The pieces are the same size. I just have to figure out which one I took more from. All right? This one is a -5, and this one is a -6. So let's think about our number line. Here would be 0. We have a whole bunch of numbers down here in the negativeness, counting in order, going away from 0. So my -6 would be here, and my -5 would be there. And if you remember, left is less, so -6 is further to the left, which means -6/16 is less than -5/16. Okay, so remember everything you've talked about with ordering fractions. Remember everything that you've talked about with ordering decimals, and everything you've talked about with ordering negatives, and roll it all together, and that's what we're doing today.